This week on Angelo's Motorcycle, what do the initials TCLOCS mean to you? Stick around. So let's talk about TCLOCS. The TCLOCS inspection, anybody who's taken the MSF course knows that it's a pre-ride inspection. So before we ride, we check our machines. We're always talking about maintaining positive risk offset, having a mind towards safety, having escape routes, and all of the wonderful things to make us better riders. But sometimes we forget about the machine that we're riding. And I'm not just talking about routine maintenance. I'm not talking about oil changes and checking the air filter. I'm talking about a quick inspection to check things out every single time before you ride to identify any potential safety issues. TCLOCS is tires, controls, lights, oil, chassis, and stands, meaning the kickstands. So we want to check those things every time before we ride. How effective is your brake light at warning motorists if it's out? You squeeze the lever, the light doesn't come on, nobody knows you're stopping. That's really dangerous. Same thing with turn signals. What if your turn signals are not functioning? You've turned on your turn signal, but it's not blinking. Nobody knows you're going to turn. Motorists don't pay enough attention as it is. We need to do everything we can to communicate our intention to the motorists to maintain safety. And tire pressures. You have two little tiny contact patches in touch with the road. That's it. If either one of those contact patches experiences difficulty, so will you. So, we want to maintain our tire pressures. Also, not only from a safety standpoint, also from a wear standpoint. Tires, whether they are low or too high in tire pressure, would wear prematurely, wear unevenly, and potentially become dangerous and need to be replaced prematurely. And motorcycle tires are not cheap. So, let's talk about our TCLOCS inspections. The TCLOCS inspection is actually, there's a nice little TCLOCS document that MSF puts out. I'll put a link in the description. And this is for free. You can go to the MSF website and you can download the TCLOCS inspection and you can use it. I keep a whole stack of them in a little clipboard in the workshop for when I'm working on the school bikes, but then also for my own personal machines. And this covers everything. And you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to be walking around with a checklist and a lab coat and glasses, though I pretty much do. But, just have a mind toward the things that are on it and check everything as much as you can before you ride. So, let's get started. We're going to do a TCLOCS inspection on the beautiful CFMOTO 450SS. Let's get to work. I've got my TCLOCS form here, and there's a lot of good stuff on here. So for tires and wheels, tires, check the condition, check the air pressure, front and rear. Wheels, we're going to check the spokes, the cast, the rims, the bearings, the seals. So now this is relatively easy to do. People say, oh my God, we're going to check the bearings. Yes, we're going to check the bearings. And it's very simple. All we have to do is give this wheel a pull, right? If there's something wrong with the bearing, you're going to feel like a wiggle in it. It's a lot easier with it off the ground, truth be told. But if it's bad enough, you're going to feel a wiggle. You're also going to feel it when you're riding. So we'll just go back here to this rear wheel, kind of pull on it, it's fine. I'm looking at the tire tread. The tire tread looks good. Doesn't look like there's any issues there. I have a light here now. And we can just look it over. Make sure that it looks good, and it looks fine. Then we're going to consult our manual for our pressures, right? Mine is actually in my phone, which is on the stand recording. So we're going to, let's see here, what can I do? I can get a manual. Hold on one second, I'll be right back. So now, through the magic of video editing, I now have my owner's manual. See, I keep my tire pressures in my phone. I have a notes app in my phone. And I have a list of all my motorcycles with all the tires, all the tire pressures, a whole bunch of things, what oil filter it uses, what oil it uses, so that I can, at a moment's notice, have all my important TCLOCS information or anything else that I may need handy in my app and not have to pull the manual. So we have the beautiful CFMOTO 450SS owner's manual here. And it says that we are going to have 32.6 PSI. Obviously there's some rounding being done here. And 35.5 PSI. So I basically run 33 front, 36 rear. That's what I've been doing. So let's go ahead and check the pressure on this front tire. We'll go to the side with no brake rotor, since it's a little bit easier that way. And here is the beautiful valve stem cap that came with my lever protectors. That is pretty nice, I gotta say. It was just in the package, as you saw in the other video. So we're looking for 33 front. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put that on there. There we go. Squeeze the trigger and it'll tell me the tire pressure. Hey, look, I'm at 33.5. That's good enough for me. And now we'll put that back on. Looks good. And we'll go to the rear tire. I always go to the non-chain side because the chain is very greasy. And look, here it is. And now we'll be looking for 36 back here. So let's go ahead and squeeze that trigger, see what it comes up with. 36.5. That's good enough for me. Half a pound is fine with me. So there's our tire pressures. And they are adequate. And getting one of these little Ryobi with the digital pressure gauge makes it awfully convenient. Very convenient. So the wheels, I looked at the wheels while I was doing the tire pressures. But we will look at them again. So there's no damage to the rims, there's no cracks, there's no gouges, there's no anything that's going to potentially cause a problem. There's no dents. The rims don't seem to be out of round. You would know. How you would tell is you get it up and you spin it. This is obviously a more in-depth TCLOCS than just before you're going riding. So then we go to controls. We go to the handlebars. Make sure that the bars are straight. Turn freely. Hand grips go end to end without hitting anything. Right? Nothing is bent. If you have accidentally dropped your motorcycle, then you're really going to want to check that, right? Make sure that your controls feel like they should. They're comfortable. The levers and the pedal, they're not broken, they're not bent, they're not cracked. The pivots are lubricated. The clutch on the 450SS is so nice. And these pivots are lubricated, of course. If you've been caught out in the rain, guess what? Time to lubricate all your pivots, right? Because the water gets in there. Hey, motorcycles get wet. They get rained on. You know, I'm an all-weather rider. I ride in the rain. It happens, right? You get caught out in the rain. You get home. You let everything dry out. You've got to use a little lubrication on all of your pivots. Make sure that you keep them happy and healthy, right? Each brake alone should keep the motorcycle from rolling, right? You should be able to compress that front suspension without it moving. Same thing with the back brake. We'll go around to the other side. If you go to wheel the motorcycle, there we go. You should be able to hold it and not move it with that rear brake. The rear brake should hold the bike. Okay, cables, right? We're looking at the cables. You want to make sure that they're properly adjusted, right? You should have the right amount of throttle play. You should have the right amount of clutch play. The cables should look fine. There shouldn't be any cuts. There shouldn't be any gouges. There shouldn't be any problems. Follow them all the way down. Where is your speed sensor wire going? Has that come off? Is it hanging? Is it going to get caught in the tire? Right? We don't want that. Same thing with the rear brake. We're looking at the rear brake cables. We're making sure that they're where they're supposed to be. They haven't come loose. They haven't moved around. These things happen. Hoses. If you've got radiator hoses. Obviously, this is a fully faired motorcycle. It's a little harder for us to see hoses. But they are in there, and we can check them. We can check the radiator, make sure the radiator looks good. Boy, my radiator's got a lot of dead bugs on it. The throttle moves freely, snaps closed. Also, you shouldn't experience any revving of the engine when you turn your handlebars, right? And we'll check that when we start it. Lights and electrical. The battery is good. The terminals are clean. The electrolyte level, I mean, that's from old batteries before they were sealed. Most people would have a sealed battery nowadays, and that the battery is held down securely. It's under the seat. It's not going anywhere. Headlamp, right? There's no cracks. There's nothing broken. And of course, it's not. The aim is good. You'll know that if you ride at night. You don't want to be blinding motorists. And again, this is a more in-depth TCLOCS. The tail lamp and the brake lamp work. The turn signals flash correctly. So let's go ahead and power this up. And we can go ahead and start it. We'll check let that do its thing. There we go. All right, turn our handlebar. Make sure there's no revving of the engine. Okay, let's check our high beams. High beams work. Let's check our turn signals. There's the left one. There's the right one. Let's check our brake light. Brake light's working good. Excellent. How about the horn? Horn works. Very good. Boy, that motorcycle sounds fantastic. Alright, we're in a closed garage. Thumb, key, valve. No valve on this, it's fuel injected. So, the switches. All the switches function normally as they should, and they just did. Oh, we could check our hazards as well. I love motorcycles that have hazards. And they function. The mirrors are clean. They're fine. They're not cracked or broken or missing or damaged. Lenses and reflectors. We have lenses and reflectors, right? There's 2 reflectors on this motorcycle on either side of the front fender. And then there are 2 reflectors on, well, 3 reflectors actually, 2 facing sideways and 1 facing rearward on the, whatever you call this, rear fender turn signal holder. The piece that a lot of people take off, right? And the wiring looks good. We already talked about the wiring. So, I'm going to touch base on the reflectors for a second. And a lot of people like to get aftermarket turn signals. And I know aftermarket turn signals look cool and fender eliminators look cool, but let me tell you something about that. The flashers that are on the turn signals that are on the motorcycles, they're approved by DOT because they put out a certain amount of light. Okay? If you're not putting out that certain amount of light, you could potentially have an accident, right? If you do have an accident and your motorcycle has had factory turn signals removed and different turn signals put on, you might run into an issue where the person whose fault it was, let's say it was their fault, it might not necessarily be their fault anymore, right? Because they can say, well, I couldn't see their turn signals because you had those little tiny turn signals that nobody can see. I see so many people with that. So I personally, and this is a personal choice, you got to do your own thing. This is America, right? Me personally, my personal choice is I leave the factory turn signals on. I leave the motorcycle alone. I don't want to put myself in a position where I am endangering myself by having other motorists not be able to see my turn signals. So that's my spiel on turn signals. I leave them be. That's just me, my own personal preference. I know the aftermarket turn signals look cool, and some of them are very bright. Some of them, like, I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the little ones that you can't see. That's really not a great idea. So, oil and other fluids. So, this motorcycle does not have gear oil, shaft drive, hydraulic fluid, gear oil or shaft drive. However, this machine does have brake fluid, which we can very easily check with this this big bucket of radiator reservoir of brake fluid reservoir that's on the handlebar, and that looks great. This motorcycle does have coolant that you check by examining through this little well-placed slot here, and I can see the green coolant in there, so that I know is fine. And then the rear brake reservoir is also a clear see-through item that is right here. and we can check it with a light, and I can see that the fluid is clear and looks good. And that fluid should be clear. This is a relatively new machine with like 15 or 1600 miles on it so far. Oil level. So I'm just going to grab this front brake, and I'm going to move the motorcycle off of the side stand, make it level, and I'm going to look in the sight glass window, and there it is. Not only is that oil at the proper level, but that oil looks exceptionally clean and clear, and boy, that side stand makes me nervous. The side stand on the 450 SS, it has that little bit of give when it comes over, and it just, it reminds me of the Jiffy stand on the Harley. Makes me nervous. So our oil looks good. Our fuel, I know the fuel is full because I just filled it, but we'll go ahead and take a look. Why not? Oh, and there it is, full as can be. And we'll close it. So then we have, boy, that stinks. We checked the coolant, we checked the brakes, we checked all the fluids. So that's oil and fluids done. So chassis, frame. So we're looking at the frame, we're making sure that there's no cracks, there's no damage. There's no scratches where anything could have maybe hit the frame. There's no anything. It looks really nice. The frame is actually very nice on the 450. This particular motorcycle is mostly faired. So unless you're going to pull all the Tupperware off, you're not going to get to look at that. And I wouldn't suggest doing that before every ride. I would say that you could do that maybe annually, maybe every other year, depending on what you do with your motorcycle. If you do a lot of track days, track events, you might take a look at that a little more frequently. You might pull the Tupperware off and take a look at things. So, what else is on here? Suspension, smooth travel, equal air pressure dampening, anti-dive settings. Smooth travel, equal preload, air pressure dampening settings for the rear, front and rear. So, how you're going to do that is that's a major deal, right? So you're going to talk about, now you're talking about pulling wheels off and measuring the distance that the front suspension travels. And then the rear shock, obviously you're talking about jacking it up and using a jack to push it and make sure that it functions. Or you just sit on it, right? You sit on it and you feel it, what it feels like. So you get on the machine and you give the lever a squeeze, and that feels perfectly normal to me, as does the rear suspension. I'm not bottoming out. I'm not having any issues where my weight is sagging the motorcycle more so than it usually does. So I know that my shocks are charged. I also know while I'm riding that if I'm bottoming out on small road imperfections, then obviously something's wrong. It needs to be looked at. The chain or belt. Check the chain at tension at the tightest point. This is easiest done with a race stand. Put the motorcycle up on a race stand, move the chain, right? I feel that this chain is probably at its tightest point already, and I already know that I need to do a chain adjustment. My chain is too loose. It has come loose. At the first service at 600 miles, it didn't really need any adjustment. I have since put 1,000 miles on this motorcycle. And I'll be honest, I like using this motorcycle for what it was intended. This is made for back roads, having fun, running out the gears, accelerating. Now, you can do that safely. And I, of course, do that safely. I obey the letter of the law with speed limit. But this is one of those machines that you can rev out first gear and shift and rev out second gear and listen to the exhaust and have great fun. And then you're just hitting the speed limit as you're coming out of third gear. You know, that's wonderful. You can't do that with the 1000cc Ninja that I've got sitting over there. That thing you run, I very rarely shift out of third on that motorcycle because there's just no reason to. You're going 60 miles an hour, you're turning 4,000 or 5,000 RPM, and you're in third gear. I mean, that machine is obviously not made for the street. It's made for other things, track days and as such. So, So this needs a chain adjustment, which I will do that after. But I'm aware that it needs a chain adjustment. Fasteners, tight, missing bolts, nuts, making sure the clips and cotter pins aren't broken or missing. So looking at the wheel nuts, there are no cotter pins on these. That's just the way they are designed. They are all there. They are all appear to be tight. You could go so far as to, if you had enough time, pull your owner's manual or service manual, check the torque specifications for those fasteners, and double check the torque specifications on those fasteners. Now, I wouldn't necessarily do that every time before I ride, but I would check them periodically. But every time before you ride, you should be checking for loose ones. Hey, if it's sticking up that far and you can see threads, guess what? It's loose. It needs to be adjusted, right? And I'm checking all the handlebars, making sure that nothing is loose. And then same thing with especially shift linkage, making sure that nothing is loose. These motorcycles vibrate quite a bit. Check your spools. Make sure your spools aren't loose. A lot of people put spools on their bikes. Use Loctite Blue when you put the spool on your bike. The spools have a tendency to loosen up. And then if you go to lift it on the stand, on the race stand, and the spool has unthreaded, maybe it comes out and destroys the thread, and the motorcycle falls off the stand. So it's a double whammy. And then I would check the clutch cable, make sure that that is in adjustment, as far as make sure that nothing is loose. These things have a tendency to come loose. Throttle cables also have a tendency to come loose in their carrier if somebody hasn't tightened those nuts appropriately. But all my fasteners appear to be securely fastened. Everything looks good on this machine. So, and then the center stands. Is your center stand, excuse me, do you even have a center stand? This motorcycle does not. Side stand, is it cracked? Is it bent? Is the safety cutout switch not functioning? Does it spring in place? Does it take tension to hold position? So when we go to put the side stand up, what they're saying is, does the spring pull it up? And it does. And that prevents it from coming down when you go over a bump. Is the switch working? Right? So, the switch working, I'm going to try and put it in first gear. Haha. There, it's in first gear. And it will not start because the side stand's down. So the side stand safety switch is functioning as designed. So that's a TCLOCS inspection. Now you might not necessarily do all the steps of it every single time you ride, but you should definitely work it into your riding routine. Make sure you're checking your tire pressures every time, checking your lights every time, and then maybe do a couple of the other things each time. Don't necessarily do them all at once. And then as far as the big stuff, once a year, checking things that require taking the wheel off, or raising the wheel off of the ground and spinning the wheel or whatnot. You should do that stuff. But guess what? The wheel is also spinning when you're riding, right? So be cognizant of how it feels when you ride. If all of a sudden you're starting to get a vibration in the front end, hey, you need to look at something. If all of a sudden you're starting to get a vibration in the back, then hey, you got to look at something. If the chain is slapping, or grinding or whirring or making some noise, the chain on this one just began slapping on the last ride. That's how I know I need to do a chain adjustment. And sure enough, I checked it, and yes, I need to do a chain adjustment. I'm also going to do a little bit of a suspension adjustment because the 450SS or 450SR comes from the factory with that rear suspension tuned pretty hard. You run over a bump in the road and it launches you into the stratosphere. So I'm going to soften it up just a little bit. So go ahead and like, share, comment, subscribe. Please help me get this channel off the ground. Also, let me know down in the comment section how often you're T-clocking your machines. Stay safe out there. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Take two. Angelo's Motorcycle T-clocks. Take two. Hold on a minute. I need a coffee. Pumpkin spice. It's a little early for pumpkin spice, but I'm glad it's out. This week on Angelo's motorcycle, the neighbor's barking dogs won't shut up. It's unbelievable. All day, no dogs. They will come till now. The hell was that? 7:47 just flew by. This week on Angelo's motorcycle, what do the initials TCLOCS mean to you? I'm being attacked. Damn fly. Get out of here. This week on Angelo's motorcycle, killing flies in the workshop. I'm having too much fun with this.